My daughter received a bike from her uncle, my brother, on her 11th birthday. She was over the moon and excited to use it because it was on her wish list for so long. Days ago, I discovered that my husband reached out to my brother to ask for the recipient for the bike and returned it to the store, and kept the money for himself while my daughter was at school. The bike was at home. My daughter and I got home and she started crying after noticing the bike was gone. My husband was home at the time. He told me he returned the bike and got money in return to spend on something useful for us since the bike was just there as a distraction and there was no need for it now since we're the dead of winter. I was aggravated and lost it on him, saying it wasn't his, didn't come from him. And he didn't pay for it, so he had no right to touch it, knowing our daughter's been wanting it for a long time, and my brother was decent enough to buy it for her despite barely having money to get him by. I told him what he did was theft and insisted he hand over the money to me so I could repurchase it, but he said he spent it on stuff for the house and doesn't have any money left now. But I knew about the money he was stashing away in the bedroom that he forbade me from tossing, and I took some of it and went out to repurchase the bike while he was out the next day. He found out and verbally lashed out at me, saying I should have never touched the money he was saving for himself, which isn't much, but I lashed right back that I had to so I could repurchase the bike he took from under our daughter. He explained that he didn't keep the money for himself and instead spent it for necessities for our home, but he was at fault for taking the bike in the first place and he was responsible for getting it back. He yelled at me for almost 10 minutes, then stormed outside and started smoking. My daughter asked why her dad was upset and that she no longer wants the bike if dad doesn't want her to have it. But I assured her that's not the case and told her she shouldn't feel guilty and to just focus on enjoying her bike. My husband hasn't stopped grilling me about how I disrespected and undermined him, and managed to make our daughter hate him after making him look like the bad guy. I again said he shouldn't have touched the bike. End of the story. He's called me thief and juvenile for taking money from his savings and being sneaky about it. My apartment complex didn't do traditional trick or treating on Halloween. Residents were advised to set out pre-packaged individual candy bags on their patios / front door areas if they wanted to participate, but the traditional knock on door, physically hand strangers candy was not permitted. So, Halloween comes and the kids are all dressed up and each building has a scheduled time where the kids go door to door. I ended up having to work late, so my neighbor offered to walk my kids around with hers at our building's scheduled time. About 45 minutes later, my kids came home with a small bucket of candy. 6 little goodie bags each from individual apartments that participated. Everything was fine. And my kids didn't say anything weird had happened. They were just excited to eat candy once they got home. The next day I took my kids to the park directly across from our apartment complex. My neighbor was there with her kids as well. The kids were playing and she took out one of those individual goodie bags with candy in it from her purse and started to loudly rummage in it. She ate several pieces of candy and my daughter eventually noticed. Ran up and asked if she could have a piece, and my neighbor responded, "Nope, this is my tax candy. Remember that this was my reward for taking you trick or treating last night." I was a little weirded out by that statement and asked what she meant. She said that since she is the one who had to take the kids out, she took 5 bags from each of my kids as a tax. Her son then chimes in and said, "You only took 2 bags from us." She responded with, "But I'm your mom. I was doing OP a favor so they get a higher candy tax." I was thinking about how to respond when I noticed that she was holding a Starburst candy and decided to just smile and nod and go back to watching my kids. I let her continue to finish off the bag of candy and then said, "Hey, aren't you vegan? You know a lot of those candies are made with animal products, right?" I explained what gelatin was and how a lot of those candies are made with it. She was horrified, Googles it, and then told her kids that they were leaving. She said something about how she was going to be sick and stormed off. Now she's giving me dirty looks every time we see her and won't let her kids play if she shows up at the park and we are there. My husband thinks I'm an asshole cause I should have either not said anything about the gelatin or said something right away when I noticed. I don't think it's my job to tell a vegan what is and isn't vegan though, and she deserved it for stealing candy from little kids. When we got home from the park after the gelatin incident, I sat my kids down and asked why they didn't tell me that the neighbor took half of their candy. My oldest kid is 6 and my youngest kid is 4. 6-year-old explained that as they went door to door during their designated trick-or-treating time, she would have my 4-year-old grab 2 bags instead of 1 from each apartment for the majority of them. She explained it to my kids that they were grabbing extra bags for her to be handed over at the end as taxation. So either freaking way she was directly taking candy from my kids or taking candy from other kids through mine. As for the authenticity of her vegan sim, I may have exaggerated when I said super vegan when I first posted this. She claims to be vegan and is very in people's faces about the benefits, etc. It's 100% about the health side. She brags about veganism curing cancer, diabetes, even some mental health issues. I have never once heard her talk about the benefits for animals. She also sells herbal tea products, customized gym clothing, etc., so she totes a pretty big vegan lifestyle. If that makes sense. Now for the gelatin. She knows what gelatin is, she knows what it's made out of, she knows that there are obvious things that she can't eat. But she had no idea that a lot of candy specifically had gelatin apparently. When I told her that they had gelatin in it, she knew what gelatin was but Googled the candies to see if I was correct. I think she is either really dumb or she eats non-vegan stuff all the time when no one's watching, and had to pretend to be horrified about it at this point. 'Cause a lot of you guys have pointed out that you literally can't be vegan and not know these things. I'm not vegan, I'm not even freaking vegetarian, and I know these things. I got my son a 7K motorcycle for his 18th birthday this past June. My son is obsessed with automobile and loves motorcycles. In his room he has plenty of models and posters of motorcycles of all types. His bio dad passed away when he was just 12, now I'm married to my current husband and he has kids of his own. My husband has always been against my son's interest in motorcycles. He thinks I'm encouraging him to be reckless, distracting him from school and by extension his future, and spoiling him and blowing away money by spending 7K on a motorcycle. This caused some tension between him and my son, so I told him to stop complaining about it. Around 2 weeks ago, my son's motorcycle went missing. We opened a police report but nothing came out of it. It just disappeared. My husband had a smirk on his face the entire time, just walking around saying, "I told you so. You just wasted your money." This was unbearable to hear, to be quite honest. My mother-in-law visited few days ago. She was talking about the other house my husband owns and mentioned seeing a motorcycle. One that's similar to the one that we lost in my husband's carriage while she was cleaning it. She goes to clean that house weekly even though it's empty. My husband plans on giving it to his kids as inheritance. I was puzzled. I asked if she was certain, but she showed me a photo she took of it which confirmed that it was indeed my son's motorcycle. I immediately rushed to call my husband and confront him about it. He admitted that he took and hid the motorcycle in his garage as a last resort after me and his stepson kept brushing him and his thoughts off about the 7K being spent on something unnecessary and that could cause issues. I blew up at him demanding he return it. He refused and told me he had been considering selling it and giving the money back to me so I could use it wisely this time. I told him I was serious and that I'd call the police. He literally said, "This is a family matter and cops can't do shit about it." I had enough. I called the cops soon as I ended the call with him. The motorcycle was found and returned. But my husband had to be taken in since there was an open file about the motorcycles going missing. He was let go eventually, but he was livid with me. He came home yelling about how awful what I did was and how crazy my behavior was. I refused to engage in the argument, but he told his entire family about it and they judged me for calling the police on my own husband, even though I already asked him to return it. He said he was just looking out for my son and that one day we'll realize that he was right, but only when it's too late. My son isn't speaking to me or my husband. I feel horrible about the whole situation and am starting to think I handled this the wrong way. I met this guy about 18 months ago, and we've been together since. He knows about my employment history, and he said that he has no issue with it. Though he did ask me to tell his family the white lie I occasionally use on my CV and stuff, which is that I was a waitress. A month ago we found out that I'm 2 months pregnant. He says this is great news, and we should move in together. I assumed he'd be moving into my place because he rents his far smaller 1-bedroom flat while I own mine. And I have room for a baby's room while he doesn't. Also, I really don't want to leave my flat. It's my flat, I love it, I could see myself living here for the rest of my life. And I don't want to lose the security of owning a flat and have to go back to paying rent or a mortgage each month. However, he then said that he didn't want to move into my place, and said I should sell it and we buy a place together. I said that I like my place, it means a lot to me that I was able to buy it. And it represents years of working my arse off scrimping and saving. He then said that he understands all of that. But we should be living together by the time the baby comes, and he didn't want to live in my flat. I asked him why not. It's a great flat, it's central to everything, it's spacious, it's got room for all his stuff. There's a daycare in the building, run / owned by another tenant, and a school 5-minute walk away, the list goes on. And he said that he didn't want to live in a flat that was bought with stripper money. That really pissed me off, and I told him no. Way am I selling my flat, and that he never had an issue with my stripper money paying for this flat before now. I said I wasn't giving up the security of owning a home for someone who tries to make me feel ashamed about something I don't feel ashamed of. He said that his point is if I sold the flat then we could get a new place with the money from the sale. I said, wouldn't that still be stripper money? And he said that's different, and I asked how. He then said he was going back to his place because I can't talk to you when you're in this state. He's gone back to his flat now, and he's texted me saying I'm overreacting / irrational, and I need to think of this realistically, rather than emotionally. He says he wouldn't feel right raising a child in my flat knowing how I purchased it, and selling back / moving is the best idea of all of us, not to mention the fact he isn't on the deed because it's my place and it would never feel like our place because of this. I feel I might be the arse because I get why he might feel like it's just my place, and I feel I'm being too rigid in a time we need to work together. Plus I spoke to my sister and she sided with him, so 2 out of 3 people think I'm in the wrong here. I dumped him. There was a whole conversation, and during the conversation he said he didn't want to be a parent if I wasn't willing to do everything he wanted, including sharing a house back / deed, plus staying together. Also, at the start of the conversation I said what a few people suggested, which was that I'd be willing to sell and split the house with him, provided he paid 50%, and he got very, very angry. Very, very quickly. He also said a few other things, how it's all going to pan out just yet, but it looks like I'm going to be a single mother.